The fourth is that good small group questions are connected. This is where the questions lead to something significant and don't induce bunny trails where it'll take forever to go down that trail and then come back to where you were headed. The fifth is that good questions are conversational, questions that create conversation. Sixth would be good questions are contestable. This is where we realize that the best discussion questions maybe don't have one right answer. They're open-ended, forcing students to think. And the seventh is that good small group questions are challenging. These are questions that are obviously stretching, not easy. They may cause a little silence, but they're really going to challenge students to think. I find that some of the most challenging questions deal with the student's feelings. I've found that fact questions may reveal what someone knows, but feeling questions reveal convictions. And these convictions help students internalize and solidify their thought process on certain issues. Good questions aren't easy to ask, but good small group leaders learn how to ask good questions. The fifth thing good small group leaders do is good small group leaders talk less. One of the biggest problems I find with inexperienced youth workers, or even experienced youth workers that aren't good at leading small groups, is they talk too much. Some leaders fear silence and feel pressure to fill up silence with noise, even if it's their own noise. And some leaders want to use their small group format to teach and give answers, instruct, moralize, commentate, and show off how theologically smart they are. Well, that's a lecture, not a small group facilitator. You see, students remember very little of what they're taught, but they remember a lot of what they discuss and discover on their own, especially in a small group setting. I tell our small group leaders, if you're talking more than your students are, you're probably talking too much. A sixth quality of small group leaders is that small group leaders leave their group thinking. Just like you don't have to provide noise for every silent second, you don't have to provide answers to every question. As I've already stated, it's okay to say, I don't know, man, that is a good question. Let me see if I can find out that answer next week. You see, that type of response can even be a strategic way to end your small group. As you're wrapping up your small group, you might even try something like this. You might say, hey, did you guys read in the newspaper that yesterday the front page was that teenager who opened gunfire on the prayer meeting before school and killed several students? Can you believe that? I mean, here these kids were praying, and then they're dead. Have you ever wondered if God was such a loving God, why would he allow things like this to happen? Well, if you ask that, students in your group are probably going to say, well, what's the answer? Why does God allow that kind of stuff to happen? And then you can say, that's a great question. You know what I want you to do? Ask your parents that question, and we'll talk about it next week. Well, you know what's going to happen is that they're going to go home and they're going to ask their parents, Mom, why, if God is such a loving God, does he allow bad things to happen like that guy that opened fire on the prayer meeting? You know what the parents are going to do? They're going to call you. And they're going to say, hey, okay, what's the answer to that question? And then you can smile because you've just prompted a great question forcing Christian education into the home, which is where we know it should be anyway. So don't feel pressure to solve every problem in your short time and provide every answer each week. We sometimes feel if we can answer every question for students, it'll free them up to be servants of God. Well, that's just not true. I think students become better servants and more committed and more mature when they struggle with questions and aren't given the answer to everything. It can be very healthy to leave them thinking. Number 7, good small group leaders are flexible. As much as I've talked about being intentional with our time and establishing boundaries and asking strategic questions, I've also observed good small group leaders stay flexible to what's happening in the group. For example, if you're talking about God becoming a man, and your discussion is supposed to be on the Gospel of John, chapter 1, let's say, and you want students to leave the small group understanding the incarnation of Christ, and you're very excited about this rich theological truth, but you just discover that one of your students is in pain because he found out tonight, right before a small group, that his parents are getting a divorce. What do? Do you talk about incarnation? Do you talk about the divorce? Well, it's probably time to ditch the formal small group questions and use your own informal questions that allow that student to share his pain and tell his story and build up the community of that small group.